So how is my body responding to this? It's not a training effect. It's a discovery of here's a lock, here's a limitation. So I tried to figure out what do we need to do in order to prepare ourselves for swinging this so that we get 100% out of the benefit of it. For a while, back in the 90s, I was exploring mobility, meaning mobility is kind of a common word now.
Yeah.
But back then, I remember I was one of the lecturers for the NSCA's conference at Wake Forest University, and quite a few of I would say most of them, most of the strength and conditioning coaches laughed at me when I presented my mobility part.
Like the first person to kind of coin that phrase, right?
Yeah.
Mobility.
Yeah. And Pavel Tsetselin even tipped his hat to me. He said, look, Scott,
he mentions you in his book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you mention him in your book, your Klebo book?
You gotta tip your hat to the luminaries. Pavel did a huge amount for, and he's too often forgotten for the way things have proliferated. You've got to go back and you've got to look at who contributed what so that you understand the why.
Yeah, like I feel like with you, a lot of people they do these little flows and they kind of, it all started with you.
It all started with questions. Like I had lots of questions. I didn't have a lot of answers. And I think that's the only academically honest position that we can have is what's going on here? How am I responding to this? What's my purpose behind this? And what's the purpose behind that? Why do I need to be fit? So the mobility component, not to go into the weeds there, the mobility component was to try and prepare the joints so that I could best swing this weight. Because, that osteochondrosis I had as a kid, it would flay up my connective tissue like cotton candy. But mobility would lay down those fibers and then they would glue them together, lubricating them with this glue. And that tackiness to the fascia allowed me to prep so that the fabric was knit together. So when you pull it, it doesn't tear. It doesn't have that burn when something's pulling it. You feel like a fabric is burning. That's those adhesions starting to rip. We don't want them to rip. We want them to be challenged. So the enzymes encourage more collagen fibers to lay down. And it just becomes more lattice work. Again, I didn't know this at the time. I had lots of questions. Like, what is the right way to warm up? Because what does it matter if my core is warm? Like, what does that mean? Nobody questioned what a warm-up is supposed to do. So what's the purpose of a warm-up? And, well, it's to be able to enable you to move the thing that requires exertion. Okay, so what is this causing me to do? Well, it's trying to pull me apart. Okay, then I need to encourage the tissues to resist traction. Mobility does that; it glues it together. But that's not the only part. It's then how do you compensate for what you had done? Exertion adds challenge, but you need it to relax. If it stays tense, it creeps, leads to DOMS, delayed onset of muscle soreness. And the soreness creates secondary and tertiary problems. You create undesirable, unwanted adaptations from being sore. You change your posture, and then you go and you exercise again on top of that altered posture because of your soreness, which is self-fulfilling. So how do you stop doing what you just did? That's how I think of a warm-up. How do I no longer be shaped like that pull-up or that push-up or that sit-up? I need to be unshaped from my exertion. Equipose is one of the docs that I studied with called it. So that compensatory movement was something I had to come up with. And fortunately, that's still I believe that's something that the system is contributing to the industry. Compensatory movement is starting to pick up, but hopefully it doesn't become muddied like mobility, because mobility is no longer mobility. Mobility is you go out and you do whatever fancy movement seems exotic and wild. Like, this is interesting, and it stimulates my interest. But then as soon as they're disinterested, they stop that movement because it doesn't have a purpose. They're doing it because it's exciting, not because it's relevant.
I mean, that's why it's important to understand the whys behind everything.
Right.
Why are you doing this?
So I'm pretty radical in that I don't want to exercise unless I get 100% out of it, because any exercise, physical exercise that I do is causing wear and tear to me. So if I'm not growing from it, I am destroying from it. How do I get 100% out of the exercise? How do I use a scalpel, not a pickaxe? And that warm up and cool down, the mobility and the functional opposite compensation, I want to do the exact opposite of the thing that I had just exerted myself in. And then swinging and moving weight in odd angles that both compresses and pulls apart my body. That became CST, the 3 rings of CST: mobility, triplanar, traction, compression, and compensation, functional opposite training. Wow. It was a lot of iterations. Like, it's a lot of iterations. It'll always iterate. It will always continue to evolve. If it stops evolving, if it becomes, this is a codified system, we know how to do this, we're wrong. Because every new person that enters into it is a new jigsaw puzzle. What does that person need? And
we're all different.
Yeah, it's totally customized. One of my professors called it individualized response stereotypy. You have a stereotype that's completely individualized to you, and how you respond to this exercise is going to be unique. And then that means that how you prepare and how you compensate will be different in the same class. I could be doing a front swing, you could be doing a front swing, but how you should prepare, let's say your hips tight from jiu-jitsu and my neck's tight from the airplane,